AM 790 Talk and Business presents The Coalition, a weekly 1-hour show that looks at all sides of local, regional, and national news, as well as current events. Join us now for The Coalition.
We are The Coalition, loud and proud, issues driven, outrage porn free, live on AM 790, your source for news and business here in sunny, snowy Providence, Rhode Island. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Dave Fisher. Dave, putative mayor of Woonsocket, Rhode Island, part of the shadow government of Woonsocket, Rhode Island, taking Woonsocket, Rhode Island by storm, causing chaos, mayhem on the streets. Dave, how was your week?
Well, that's a pretty good summation, Pat. Something, a story that I've been trying to get people to bite on for quite some time, kind of got a little grasp this week of the news media, which you can go over to Go Local Prov and check out. Something we've talked about on the show before is people's Facebook personas, especially public officials, sometimes don't line up with their rhetoric. and
Really?
Certainly, call into question their ability to exercise sound judgment on any level.
Judgment would actually probably be you're being gracious, I guess.
I'm trying to be as rational and adult about this as possible, which is a change for me. I'm growing, Pat. I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone, and that's how we grow as human beings.
Baby steps, baby steps. Well, Dave Fisher's story about one Richard Fagnan's wild series of mood swing-induced rantings on Facebook actually took another step forward this week, as it was featured by Kate Nagel, who's appeared on this show, at the wonderful website golocalprov.com. I think you'll actually find it as one of the first choices that comes up on their page. And it's really...
and I want to say, I bag on Go Local sometimes, but I'll give them a lot of credit, because this is the kind of story that a lot of other news outlets won't touch with a 10-foot news pole.
Right. Well, and so wonderfully, it's both an adept and an adroit treatment of what is obviously a challenging subject. This is one of those onion stories. The more layers, the more you peel, the more there is to it. I mean, on one hand, you've got someone superficially making threats against the President of the United States, which is not acceptable regardless of your personal politics or your personal politics of hatred, as it were. On the next level, of course, it calls into judgment the question of whether or not an individual who is in an appointed or an elected position is able to successfully place a wall between one's rather insane personal feelings.
I would say, extremist would be putting it nicely.
Towards a group of individuals, whether they be Muslim, whether they be Hispanic, whoever, it's irrelevant, and whether or not
they be poor, whether they be
right, whether they be any one of the number of groups that populate Woonsocket, and whether or not one can, and essentially, and I'll use the word intentionally, segregate those feelings in their day-to-day job for the city of Woonsocket and their own personal life. That's the next issue. The next issue, of course, is using the symbol of the United States Marine to engage in some pretty egregious behavior against a sitting president of the United States. The next level, of course, we look at Facebook and we look at people's initial reflection on the image and how they react to that, and whether or not they actually read any of the text underneath. What was possibly one of the more appalling moments in this show's history is when this story was posted in the Bill O'Reilly, not the actual William O'Reilly Facebook page, but sort of a national fan club of his, and people looked at the picture, didn't read the story, didn't even bother really weren't even really cognizant of the headline, and decided to react viscerally to the picture, in which they approved of it. Wow, and let's.
In fairness, I did see one comment that was one gentleman said a bit too far. I think
a bit too far. You've got a United States Marine, a photoshopped image that Mr. Fagnan chose to, I guess, copy from someone else's page.
Well, and here's the other thing that gets me about this. The kind of cop-out of, I was just doing this to get somebody's reaction, or I was just trying to get, people's read on this. That's the unspoken rule in social media is, you like what you share and you share what you like. Like, you understand that about Facebook. If you click like on something or share on something, or somebody in your network clicks like or share and it pops up on your page, so-and-so shared this, so-and-so liked this, your automatic assumption, unless they tell you otherwise, is that they actually agree with the sentiments that they're sending along to you.
Right. And you know, it's, as a mature adult, you know, one does not, you know, yell fire in the crowded theater. One does not make terrorist jokes in the United States airport, or any airport for that matter. One particularly does not make jokes about planes crashing or any of these things. And it's not okay. It's you know, free speech. I'm as ardent, and this show is as an ardent supporter of the First Amendment and the right to free speech as any show probably in America. We actively support people in their decision to engage in peaceful, emphasis, peaceful civil disobedience. We call them heroes, all right? So to assert that all of a sudden we're being politically correct, when we advocate people taking, in a sense, peacefully to the streets and getting in the grill of their elected or appointed officials, is foolishness, absolute foolishness. So for all you armchair patriots, for all you keyboard courage laden revolutionaries whose, you know, political life does not extend beyond their living room or whatever godforsaken part of their home that they,
and your political thought doesn't extend beyond whatever meme your party and or news network has fed to you in the last 12 hours.
Right. You know, screw. You know, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, it is not acceptable for people to engage in this behavior, and quite frankly, it destroys your cause. It shows your cause to be as vacant as possibly your thought process is. So I have no patience for this. And as I read some of the responses in the Go Local Prov, folks questioned, well, what do you think about those people who took to the streets in Providence and blocked the highway? Well, you know what I think? We had them on the show. Go to the podcast. Take a few minutes. Don't expect to be the mushrooms there who need to be fed, or like the baby sparrows who need to be fed regurgitated political thought by whoever, you know, thought leader they've elected that moment to represent whatever vacant political views they maintain. All right, actually get off your and actually read something beyond what's posted by some bizarro page that no one has ever heard of or ever will heard of again in the internet. Listen to different shows. Read, I don't know, the books of the Founding Fathers. Read history. Read something besides whatever godforsaken neo-conservative whack job websites that are incentivizing you to believe in a political behavior that's based on some whack job conspiracy theory. All right? Get involved. Show up. Vote. But to sit back and rationalize this type of behavior as being political correctness run amok. Right? Listen, and by the way, on that note, if you're going to engage in cheap cliches, actually come up with a new one. All right? All right? We're going to...
This is never... And I want to be so clear about this. This entire thing is not about free speech, okay? And I'll say this over and over and over again. As a private citizen, I'll defend your right to say whatever crazy bigoted stuff you want to say. That's your right as a private citizen. When you become a public official, you know, not only should you be scrutinized for things like this, you should be violently scrutinized for things like this. And the standard to me changes when you're a public official, because you cannot be expected to manifest that type of prejudice and expect to be any kind of impartial in your day-to-day dealings.
Right. I mean,
it can't. I'm sorry, folks. There's no way to compartmentalize a generation's worth of bigotry.
Yeah. No, I mean, how do you expect to be a zoning officer of a city where you're routinely asked to make decisions on behalf of people's financial future when, in fact, you display an overt disgust towards any one of a number of the groups that are part of your constituency? How do you separate that? How do you say to me that this is free speech? All right, go home, go down to your basement, all right, do whatever you want to do, knock yourself out. Just don't do it on the city of Woonsocket's, the state of Rhode Island, and Providence Plantations, the United States federal government's time. It's all good, all right? Think whatever you want. But don't violate my space with your wanderings and your rhetorically impotent critiques.
Right, and at the end of the day, if this man was a private citizen, I would have done what I do to so many other people who pop up in my Facebook feed that spew just blatant ignorance. I would have blocked him from my feed and probably unfriended him, and that would have been the end of it. But the fact remains, wait a second, this guy makes decisions that affect people's lives.
Exactly. Now, I've actually, one of our longtime callers has messaged me, one of my longtime political friends, Joe Bernstein, who is famous in Rhode Island as being, and he's been on the show, by the way, as being an arbiter and being someone who follows the path of truth and righteousness. He posits, of course, that there was a film during the Bush administration, and the media that displayed, I guess, overtly some of the same behavior, and the media wasn't outraged about it. I was. I didn't have a vaunted position in the bowels of the Rhode Island media at the time.
There was actually something that was brought to my attention by our show friend Kenneth, not running for governor.
Right. And I can remember,
and it was this. Granted, it was a group of Healy supporters, kind of like a splinter group that put out this clearly anti-Semitic picture of Gina Raimondo with, kind of like the cartoon, I don't know how else to put it, but like the propaganda, like demon Jew, like looking over her shoulder. They even photoshopped her nose in the picture to look bigger. I mean, it was so egregious. And I'm like, what did Healy have to say about this? And there was crickets. Like, people contacted the campaign and nobody said anything about it. Right. Frankly, he lost a vote because of that, because right. he wouldn't take that stand and say, this is absolutely wrong. I denounce this type of stuff. These people may vote for me, but this certainly is not going to guide my my tenure as governor if elected.
Right. The guide words here you're going to see a lot from us over the next few weeks as we discuss this is tacit support. During that same period, during the Bush administration, the director, I guess a producer or writer of the Angels in America Broadway show did a piece about Laura Bush. Now, if there was ever an inoffensive person in American political history as possible whose primary political objective as First Lady was to foster, oh my God, people's ability to read, and they took an incredible cheap shot at her when they came up with this play. And we're talking about people who wrote a play, not an overnight process, not something they just kind of ad-libbed on a comedy stage. They wrote a play how Laura Bush sat in a room filled with the ghosts of, I believe it was Afghani children or Iraqi children. I think it was Afghani children who are then wondering why she had allowed them to be killed. And at the time, I was equally outraged because that couldn't have been further from the truth. There was no basis in reality for that. And while her husband as president engaged in some pretty disgusting behavior, all right, clearly, if that's going to, quote unquote, grow the role of public discourse, shockingly disappointed. So, I as an individual, as a citizen of this country, and as someone who considers himself relatively political, is going to take both sides to task. I will not engage in the sort of moral righteousness of saying, look, they did it, so it's okay, and he did it, it's okay, and this person excused it. I'm sorry, I'm going to call it out every single time. And this time it needs to be called out. What's been deafening is the silence of the mayor of Woonsocket. What's been deafening is the silence of the the city solicitor of Woonsocket, the city council, the people who are responsible. Now, they did not appoint this individual. The prior mayor, Leo Fontaine, did, and nothing has been done with it. The other operative word that you're going to hear in this show repeatedly over the next few weeks is crickets, because you hear nothing. And again, I guess in summing it up, I'd like to say congratulate Kate Nagel for stirring the hornet's nest and bringing up an issue. She also brought into focus similar, though not quite as egregious, behavior on behalf of a Coventry school official. It's an issue that needs to be discussed. You're listening to The Coalition on AM 790, your source for news and business. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, Libertarian Talk Radio, Twitter, Coalition_radio, and of course our world-famous now blog at www.coalitionradio.us. We'll be right back. And it's at this moment that I want to briefly talk about our sponsor, Beacon Shipping and Logistics. Every week we give you a horror story, or as I like to call them, Tales from the Shipping Crypt. I've got to say that very, very carefully here on FCC-approved radio. Beacon Shipping Logistics, Warwick-based. Imagine having the advantages of a national/international vehicle shipping company here right in your hometown. The best of the Internet. There's no reason why you have to substitute price for performance. Fully insured, fully bonded, They'll know where your car is. Covered shipping, point-to-point driven shipping, everything you need. If you've got that car, if you're right now at this time of the year when the snowbirds are coming back and maybe you don't want mom and dad taking that trip for the 21st